You are listening to the Haig MD channel. Nothing on this channel is medical advice. It is for information purposes only, and before you make any changes, or if you need advice, call your own doctor. Hello, Dr. Melissa Haig coming to you with episode number 3 of Girls. So we've already covered the little girls, the toddlers, the leading up to starting your first period, kind of how to talk to your daughters about sexual health and development, or at least at the very least that you have to be the one to talk to them about all of that if you want them to be educated properly. Now we're going to talk about, so she is having periods, what's normal? Like, how do periods start? Do they just start with a 28-day cycle and it's all beautiful? The answer is no. Any of us who has had periods and remembers, which I don't remember that far back, but anyway, it does not typically start out normal. So a girl might have a period and then not have another one for 2 or 3 months. That's okay. It's okay that first several years for periods to be spaced out. That's what we call immaturity in many ways. So this hypopituitary ovarian axis, so those the parts of the brain talking to the ovaries, telling the ovaries, let's do this thing. They do not have a mature relationship for several years after starting your periods, and really 4 to 6 years, depending on what you read. So what can you expect during that time period? Well, what's supposed to happen when you are mature is at the beginning of your cycle. So cycle day 1 is the first day of bleeding. Starting in that time period, the brain sends a signal to the ovaries, which we call FSH, among other things, and says to the ovaries, get some eggs ready. Well, you and I are typically born with about 400 eggs, give or take. Clearly, we don't have 400 children. Praise Jesus. That would be a very expensive lifestyle. Or very life-giving. But each ovary every month may get as many as 10 eggs started in the cycle to become the ovulatory egg. Only one of those wins the race, usually, occasionally 2, sometimes 3. Usually those are medicated, not always. I have a couple spontaneous triplets over the years. But 1, 2, or 3 eggs wins the race and it becomes a cyst on the ovary. So the short story is, if you have an ultrasound and they say to you, you have an ovarian cyst, if you are not preventing ovulation with like birth control, for example, it's probably normal, because more than like 15 days out of the month, you can have a cyst and it's completely normal ovarian function. Anyway, back to our story. This becomes a cyst. The cyst eventually ruptures and releases the egg. If there is no sperm hanging out in the tube to meet the egg, because that is the party zone, the fallopian tube is where the two get together and the magic happens. That's why you can get tubal pregnancies, because sometimes they don't make their trek into the uterus. But anyway, in the absence of sperm present at the correct time, the egg just dissolves and goes away. The ovarian cyst eventually also goes away. Well, when that cyst goes away, a hormone called progesterone that was being made during that time period to prepare for the human to take place in the uterus. When progesterone goes away, it is that withdrawal of progesterone that causes a bleed. So as physicians, menstruation periods are actually progesterone withdrawal bleeding. A normal period is in response to ovulation that did not result in a pregnancy. Anything outside of that would be considered abnormal uterine bleeding. So normally, this happens on a monthly basis, right? If you're normal. Well, as an adolescent, it can be you have one and then you don't for 2 months, or you have a 32-day cycle and then a 21-day cycle and then a 47-day cycle. And again, that can be very normal the first several years. Notice I said normal, not irritating, right? Maddening for these teenage girls to just be like hanging out in gym class, for example, and all of a sudden you're bleeding through your clothes. Or you're off on a mountain hike and all of a sudden you're bleeding through your clothes. So it can be very frustrating for this population. If a woman brings her daughter into me, or a man brings his daughter into me and says, we've got to do something, I mean, this is getting very frustrating for her, she can't predict it, we have a couple different options. The first one is you can do nothing. You don't have to treat this. It will typically, if she is hormonally normal, metabolically normal, it will get better over time. But sometimes we use bioidentical progesterone in the second part of the cycle. So once a woman is ovulated, We give them progesterone for 16 days or so and then have them stop it, because remember we said period bleeding, normal bleeding is in response to progesterone withdrawal. So we have them stop the progesterone and then they have their period, and we do that for several months in a row. That's called cyclic progesterone therapy, to try to get their cycles back to normal. That's my preference. Some physicians will just treat with birth control pills. That's not really my preference. I really like to help mimic the natural cycle as much as possible, especially in younger girls. But nevertheless, those are some options that might be discussed if you take your daughter in. When is it really, really abnormal and we need to check this out? So the first of all, it is really abnormal if she has such heavy bleeding, she's soaking through a pad an hour for multiple hours in a row, especially if it's happening more than the first day of her cycle. Sometimes she is having that because she has a blood clotting disorder. And especially if you have a known family history of a blood clotting disorder, you should get that checked out. That would not be normal. The other thing that would not be normal is if she starts bleeding and it just doesn't stop. You know, you're on week 2 or 3 and it is just not stopping. That would be another time to have it addressed. It does not mean she's broken or has cancer or is never going to be normal in her life. It just means sometimes we need to reset that immature axis with the brain and the ovary. Those are reasons to take her in. But let's fast forward a little bit. Let's say we are now having normal, regular cycles, but they are so painful that that first day she is puking her guts out and she has to go home from school. Is that normal? Well, maybe it's normal for her, but normal, again, doesn't mean that she wants to put up with it or that you want to put up with it. So what kind of things can you do? There are a lot of different options. I would definitely seek professional help. But one thing you can try for that kind of pain is an herbal supplement called Chaste Tree. And this has been studied. There's several studies. If you Google this, you'll find them. It has been shown to improve what we call dysmenorrhea. That means pain with cycles in a lot of populations. And it's fairly low risk. There's not a lot of interaction with other things. So it's certainly something that you could have your daughter try. She just takes it every day. Other options, really, you should seek out medical help. If she is that ill with every cycle, you need to seek some help. It can't be so life disrupting that she hates being a girl, hates her life, and can't have a normal life because of her cycles. So definitely seek help. How you talk about sexuality during this time. The first thing girls need to know is you can get pregnant. If you are having periods, you can get pregnant. And what causes pregnancy is sex. And I cannot tell you the number of times that it's been heartbreaking that I have seen very young girls pregnant at 11 or 12 or 13 that I'm pretty convinced they really had no idea what action led to their pregnancy. It is our job as their parents to make sure they know what causes pregnancy. It's also our job to protect them and make sure they're not in a situation where that could happen. But nevertheless, it is important for her to know that especially when your cycles are irregular and unpredictable, that also means your ovulation is not predictable. That means pregnancy is not predictable. And if they are choosing to be sexually active during that time, they absolutely could become pregnant. Now, my preference is that no one is sexually active until they are with the person they are going to spend their life with. And I made sure my girls knew the whys behind that. This is not just an old fuddy-duddy ancient principle. This is also how you protect yourself from sexually transmitted infections like herpes that you get to keep forever, or chlamydia that can lead to scarring in the tubes and difficulty getting pregnant later, or HPV, which is the virus that causes cervical cancer. If you only have one sexual partner in your lifetime, you get to skip all of that. Highly recommend skipping all of that. It is our job to educate our children, then they get to make their own choices. We don't get to decide these things for them, but we can try to educate them and equip them as much as possible. I'm also a huge proponent of self-defense classes for girls in high school, especially that junior, senior age range where they're about to leave your house maybe, or live on their own. I want all of my girls to go through self-defense. And here in our town, we have an amazing lady that teaches self-defense to other women. They are available all over the place. So I'd highly encourage you to do that and do it with her. It's super fun. We had a blast when we did it with a bunch of junior girls at our church. Talk about how to say no. How, when you are in a situation of being pressured and it is something you do not want to do, what are you going to do? How are you going to say no? How forceful are you going to be with your no? What if no is not accepted? What do you do next? You get loud, you yell, you scream, you make a scene, and be very specific with your daughters about how they can protect themselves. The first way to protect yourself is to not be in a position where something could happen. But what if it's not her choice and it's not her decision to be in that position? Then you want to make sure she knows to use her voice, use her body, do everything she can to get out of that situation. What if you find out your daughter was taken advantage of, was raped, was sexually assaulted? Then what? My advice is immediately go to the authorities. And I'm going to say that every time, because that person, that perpetrator that did that to her, likely did it to others. And if he or she's not caught, will likely do it to someone else. That's my personal preference and my personal recommendation to all my patients. They also need an exam. You need to make sure they're checked for sexually transmitted infections and that they haven't sustained any injuries that need treatment. How do we talk to our girls about what's normal and not normal when they are in a situation where they are married, they're ready to pursue pregnancy? What's normal and not normal? Is that a conversation that's okay to have? My opinion, absolutely. And I mean, maybe it's because I'm a gynecologist that lots of girls ask me lots of questions, both my daughters and their friends and random people that I run into. But this is a conversation that's perfectly normal for you to have with your daughters. How do you want to prevent pregnancy later? What does that look like for you? Do you want to just make sure you know your natural cycle so well that you know when to avoid intercourse so that you don't get pregnant? Do you want to do something different? If you have really, really awful periods and we can do something to both treat your pain and prevent pregnancy when you're ready for that, maybe that's what we should do. Have those conversations though, and don't be afraid to talk about it. And also don't be afraid if you don't know the answers to everything. Make sure that you have access to someone that you can take your daughter to that's a solid healthcare professional that can share all those answers with them. And there is a time that I really made my daughters go to the doctor by themselves. I really, as teenagers, I wanted them to establish care with a trusted physician that they could talk to, that they could have these conversations with, somebody that I knew would share the same principles and morals I do, and would also give them good advice. I think that's absolutely essential. I love to see girls as they're kind of entering that junior, senior high phase of high school where we can talk about normal sexual health and development and how are they doing with things. And then they have a touch point. So they're away at college and something happens and they're not sure what to do next. They can always call us. They can call the office 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. One of my nurses always answers that line. There's always a place that they have that they can go to if they have questions or concerns. Now, if you and your daughter have a close relationship, she won't need that. But what if you don't? Or what if you're not there? What if something happens, God forbid, and you're no longer alive or you're no longer present? You want your daughter to have someone that she can talk to, and a trusted healthcare professional is an amazing place to start. I think I've covered about all I need to cover. Oh, I should probably briefly talk about acne, just because I get it all the time. Her periods are causing terrible acne. You know, it's worse like several days before she starts her cycle, and then it gets really bad. What are some things we can try? So things you can start with are just your normal basic hygiene things. There's tons of over-the-counter cleansers. Personally, I love the Cetaphil Sensitive Skin because it doesn't have any fragrances or allergens when it comes to soaps. I also am a huge fan of all natural ingredients, and I will totally put a plug in here for Wild Carrot Farms. That is run by Tanya Snyder, who is my dear sweet sister-in-law. I don't get a cut of her business, but you know, if you want to, Tanya, you know where I live. But all natural, made by hand products that don't have weird chemicals that you have to worry about. That would be the first place to start. So let's say that's not cutting it. What do you do next? Well, you back up from the time of their period, you back up 2 weeks and really work on cleaning up their nutrition for at least ovulation to their cycle. And what I mean by cleaning up nutrition is getting rid of sugar and flour. And that's really hard for a teenage girl. But if it clears her skin, a lot of them are like, I would have totally done that sooner if I knew that was going to work. And it really can. If you can get rid of a lot of those excess sugars and flours, Sometimes that alone will cause clearer skin. The other thing to explore is, does she have irritants in her diet that are actually just making it way worse? Dairy is probably one of the biggest. If you can get a girl to cut dairy, a lot of times you will find her skin will clear that way. If none of those natural things work, other things you can try are tea tree oil. Now, tea tree oil in its purest form, concentrated, can be very caustic to the skin, very irritating. So a lot of times that has to be diluted somehow with like argan oil or some other oil. But if you put those directly on the whiteheads or the blackheads, a lot of times that will help clear the skin. At the end of the day, if none of these things are working, definitely see a dermatologist. But if you wanted to start with the most natural approach, it would be totally looking at nutrition, cleaning up the diet, and getting the chemicals out of the products that she's putting on her face, including makeup. A lot of foundations, especially the cheaper foundations, are really full of things that just totally clog the pores. Most girls don't need foundation, right, moms? Like, I love my girl's skin. I would love to be back at that point. So really encouraging her that her natural skin is beautiful, that she doesn't need to cover it up. A lot of the products they put on their skin are the problem when it comes to acne. That's all I got for y'all. If you think of anything, put it in the comments or contact me. I'm happy to talk about other things, but I hope this was really helpful for those of you that are raising the littles to the middles to the teen and young women. And remember, at the end of the day, my goal was for my girls to be my daughters that I disciplined and reared and raised to be strong, young, independent women who could someday be a close friend. I'm not their friend when they're little. I'm their boss. But when they're 21, 22, 23, I want to be the trusted friend and ally they know they can call and ask questions. And those conversations started when they were toddlers. So, friends, give me anything you got, and I appreciate you all. Love out loud and live on purpose.